It's officially November, which means today we are going to be talking about the books that I read in October and kind of my thoughts on those, as well as the books that I plan to read during the month of November. This is my monthly wrap-up slash TBR video. If you guys are new, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and let's go ahead and get started. I will have all book-related links down below in the description box, including my Goodreads, my YouTube book playlist. All of those things will be down below. I will link all of the books that I'm talking about in today's video in case any of them spark interest inside of you. So let's start with the books that I read in October. Every single month I have an extremely long TBR. I'm feeling very ambitious. I'm ready to start fresh. And then I never come close to reaching my goals. So this month we have a little bit more of a realistic TBR. But in October I read 2 books. It sounds like someone is doing the yard next door, so that's great. Hopefully you guys can't hear that. But I read 2 books during the month of October, and they are both Colleen Hoover books. So the first book that I read in October was It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I loved this book. I filmed a reading vlog. If you guys want to watch it, I'll have it linked down below. But I loved this. I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. It was everything that I wanted and more. I feel complete, I feel satisfied, and my heart is full after reading this book. I think this was a great follow-up to It Ends With Us. If you guys haven't read these books, read It Ends With Us first, and then It Starts With Us second. I get questions all the time on which one should I read first. Definitely read It Ends With Us first, because that is the first book in the duology. This takes place after It Ends With Us. I know it's confusing because you read It Starts With Us after It Ends With Us, but it'll all make sense once you read it. So I would absolutely recommend this book. I think it was fantastic, and definitely read It Ends With Us first. Trigger warning, there are some very sensitive topics in both of those books, so look up the trigger warnings beforehand if necessary, and I think you guys will find that book to be fantastic. The second book that I read in October, so the only other book that I read in October, was Reminders of Him, also by Colleen Hoover. I normally don't read Colleen Hoover books back to back unless they're like in a series, because there's only so many of them, and Colleen Hoover is like my favorite author, so I want to like savor them and kind of space them out. But after reading It Starts With Us, I was craving, ironic that I used that word, I'll mention it in a second, but I was craving another Colleen Hoover book, so I decided to pick up Reminders of Him. This was another 5-star read for me. This was very different from other Colleen Hoover books that I read. I wasn't sure where this was going for quite a while, but I ended up loving it. I didn't like sob while reading this book. I think this was the first Colleen Hoover book that didn't like leave me in like bawling tears. I definitely teared up and cried, and I was very emotionally invested in this book. It was incredible, and I ended up loving so many of the characters, and I was kind of like starting off like, I don't know how I feel about these people. So if you start off with this book and you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, keep going, because it was so good. It was a beautiful story, and very heartbreaking. Don't get me wrong, it was sad and it was heartbreaking and emotional. I don't know, for some reason I didn't get, maybe I was all like emotioned out for reading this book, but I still thought this was fantastic, and I still gave it 5 stars. So both of those books were fantastic. I did start a 3rd book in October, but now that it's November, I am going to kind of roll it over to my November TBR, so we'll kind of do our transition here. And this book, this is out of all the books I've mentioned so far, this is my favorite, which is saying a lot because I love Colleen Hoover, but I'm pretty close to being done with this book. This is Crave by Tracy Wolff. This book, I can't explain the feeling that I have when I'm reading this book. Kristen read this before me. We started it like close to the same time, but then I like only read 2 chapters and I like didn't pick it up for a while. But Kristen finished it, and she told me, these were her words. She said, I think I'm gonna be obsessed with this, how I was with the After series. And I was like, really? Because if you guys don't know, both her and I loved the After series. I'm actually wearing an After inspired crew neck from Backstitch Burton. I'll have it linked down below. I loved the After series. I read the whole series, I've seen all the movies, and I loved it. It was fantastic. And I was thinking, maybe she's being dramatic. I don't know. But when I tell you that she was not being dramatic, this book, I just hit myself in the head. This book is so good. I don't know what it is about her writing, but it makes you not want to stop. Like, you have to keep going. At the end of every chapter, every page, I've never read another book written like this. It's impossible to explain. You just have to read it to know what I'm talking about. But she does this thing where she kind of like hints and kind of like tiptoes around subjects, and you're like, what does that mean? Like, you're left with a million questions. And I texted a paragraph of questions to Chris, and I was like, what does this mean? Is this how this works? Like, so many different questions. I don't want to get specific so that I don't give you guys any spoilers, but she told me that all of my questions would be answered by the end of the book. So I definitely have gotten some of those answers, but there's more that I'm waiting on, and this is a pretty thick book. But as you can see, I only have a little bit left. I think this is like maybe around 600 pages. Let's check. 571 pages, and I am currently on page 438. So I have about like 150-ish pages left. I need to know what happens, but I also don't want this to end. This is incredible. This is also my first fantasy book. So it's young adults, it's fantasy, and it's so freaking good. So I'm gonna read you this little like quote progression on the back of the book. It's not the like summary or the, I always forget what it's called, synopsis, whatever. It's not that. That's on the inside cover here, which I don't want to read that to you because I feel like it gives away a lot of the book. So I'm just gonna read this back part. So it says, have you ever, my voice breaks and I take a deep breath, then try again. Have you ever wanted something so much that you were afraid to take it? He nods. Yes. Like it's right there waiting for you to just reach out and grab it, but you're so terrified of what will happen when you lose it that you never make the reach? Yes, he says again, his voice burrowing inside me. I tilt my head up until our eyes meet, and I whisper, what did you do? For long seconds, he doesn't say anything. He just stares back at me with a look as scarred and broken as the rest of him and says, I decided to take it anyway. Then he leans down and presses his lips to mine. When I got to that part of the book, I like freaked out. I loved that scene so much. I feel like reading the back, like without context, you're like, okay, this is intense. But when you know the context of everything, it's just, wow. It's a lot. So you need to read this. Again, this is, it says Take a Bite, Crave. So obviously you can assume there's potentially some vampires involved in this book. Again, I have never read a fantasy book. This is so easy to understand, so easy to read. There is some world building. It's like our world kind of, I guess it is technically, but there's a lot of like lore and stuff like that that you kind of learn along the way. And so it's not overwhelming. And there's several books in this series already. I think there's like 4, maybe 5, and I think one is about to come out like next week. So I'm gonna have to pick up the second book, and that will also be on my November TBR because, like I mentioned earlier, I am obsessed with this book, like after obsessed. So that says a lot. I can't wait to finish this book. As soon as I'm done like filming and editing and working for the day, I'm just going to lay in bed and finish this because it's freaking fantastic. So definitely, if you pick up any book from this video, pick up Crave because it's so good. It doesn't matter that it's, you know, not October anymore, like you need to read this book. It's funny because this actually takes place like a few days after Halloween, at least like the majority of it does, and I'm like, wow, that's like literally right now. So I couldn't have read this at a more perfect time. So anyway, please read Crave. I know it's long, I know it's intimidating, but you need to read this book. It's so good. And I know I'm hyping it up a lot, but like I said, I'm obsessed. Moving on, the next book on my TBR is Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark. I read Brutal Prince and I freaking loved it. So I had to pick up Stolen Heir. This is the second book in the Brutal Birthright series. This is the beautiful discreet cover. I also picked up the the discreet cover of Brutal Prince, which is the first book. This is the second book, like I said. So I'm excited to read this. I don't want to read the back to you because it's the second book in a series, but basically it is like a mafia romance type vibe. At least the first book was, so I'm assuming this will be similar. There's like a few families involved, and it is, I guess, like a dark romance, mafia romance, but it's definitely a good introductory series. I have never read a mafia romance, dark romance, anything. But then I read Brutal Prince, and I feel like that was the perfect introduction to the genre. So please read Brutal Prince. It was such a quick read, so easy to read, so spicy, so good. It's dual POV. Definitely read Brutal Prince. You guys will not be sorry. And then again, this is the second book, so if you end up liking the first one, definitely check out the second one. I cannot wait to read that book. I just am obsessed with this cover, and I'm obsessed with Sophie Lark, and I've only read one of her books, but I've purchased like 8 of them. So next we have another series. I'm kind of maybe biting off more than I can chew with the series section of my reading life, but we'll see how it goes. This is Twisted Love by Anna Huang, and this is the first book in the Twisted series. I believe this is like a bodyguard romance, something along those lines, which again, I've never read anything like that, but I've heard great things about this series. I have the entire series, all 4 books. I don't know if there's gonna be more, but I have 4 of them as of right now. So I definitely want to get into this series and pick this book up soon. This looks like it's going to be dual POV between Alex and Ava, but other than that, I don't know much about this book at all, other than I think it's bodyguard romance. So I'm excited to read that one. Next, we have The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This is a closed-door romance book, so not like explicitly spicy. I haven't read anything by Sarah Adams, but I'm excited to read something, and this has been on multiple of my TBRs, and I just haven't gotten around to reading it. But this is a shorter book, and I feel like now that it's like football season, and I'm guessing, I mean, there's a football player on front of it, so I'm assuming football is involved here. It looks like a dancer and a football player. But I figured it would be very like season appropriate to pick this up and read that, just as something lighter to kind of mix in the bunch. Next, we have Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher, I don't know why I said Laura. Lauren Asher. This is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaires series. I read the first one, Terms and Conditions. No, what is the first one called? The Fine Print. The Fine Print was so good. Terms and Conditions is the second. I think I'm on like chapter 2, but I definitely want to try to get that book read this month. Next, we have another series. This is Ricochet by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is part of the Addicted series. It's the second book. I'm almost done with this book. I'm on page 214, so I literally have like 50 pages left or so. I don't even know, but I'm almost done with this. I just need to finish it and move on to the next one. But so far, I'm not overly impressed with this series, but everyone says to keep going, so I'm gonna keep going. I already picked up the 3rd book, so hopefully we get to that one soon. But this is going to be a definite must read for this month because I have been on that page for like the last 2 months. Next, we have a book that was actually randomly selected for my TBR. If you guys missed it, I turned around all of the books on my bookshelves that I have not read to show my physical TBR and how large it is. And I was not expecting to have that many unread books, so I need to get cranking. I haven't been buying a lot of books recently, only like new releases and like occasionally like the second book in a series, like Stolen Air, for example, and I'm gonna have to pick up the second book in the Crave series. But I flipped them all around, and then I did a random number generator, and I counted through, and I just picked whatever book I landed on, and the book that I landed on was The Spanish Love Deception. So this is a pretty thick book. I have to read this very, very soon. I will be reading it this month, and I've heard great things about this. Larry Reeds always talks about this book. I'm pretty sure this is fake dating. I think she needs a date to a wedding in Spain, so she asks like a coworker or something, and I think it's like maybe enemies to lovers, or like they're, you know, they're not super friendly at the beginning, but then they become lovers. I don't know. That's just the vibe that I got from what I've heard about this book. So I'm excited to read this. I've heard, again, so many great things about that book. And then the final book that I have on my November TBR is The Flat Share. And this is actually going to be a Paramount Plus TV show. It comes out December 1st. So I've had this on a few of my TBRs. Haven't gotten around to it, but this one sounds so good. It's dual POV between Leon and, what's her name? Tiffy. And they sleep in the same bed, but they've never met each other. So one is like on day shift, one is on night shift, and she, like, because of her circumstances, has to find like somewhere new to live, and he has an ad, I guess, somewhere, or I don't know how she finds him, but they end up like sleeping in the same bed at different times, and they never see each other, but I think they kind of leave notes and stuff to each other, so they sort of form a little bit of like a relationship, again, without even meeting. So it sounds really, really good. And again, this is going to be a TV show on Paramount Plus December 1st, so I have to read this book. This is by Beth O'Leary. I have not read any of her books before, but I'm very excited to do so. So those are all of the books on my like physical TBR for November. I do have a few books on my Kindle that I want to read, so I will talk about those now. So I want to finish reading the second book in the Midnight in Dallas series by Melissa Grace. I read the first one. It's called Home is Where You Are. The second one is called Home Again. I'm like 27% done with it, so I really want to finish that one. These are really fun, kind of like more lighthearted rom-com type books. They're really, really good so far. They're dual POV, and I think that they're fantastic. Long Way Home is the third book in the series, and that one just recently came out at the beginning of October. So definitely check out Melissa Grace and her books. You can find them on Kindle Unlimited, so I highly recommend checking her out. I loved the first one. It was so freaking good. And like I said, I'm like a quarter of the way done with the second one, so that's definitely on my TBR, as well as The Townie by Serena Peer, I think. Yes, okay, so it's called The Townie by Serena Peer. This is also on Kindle Unlimited. I was actually gifted her, like, I don't know if it's like a novella or what, but it was like a very short story, like a novella length book on Kindle, and it was called The Renter, the First 3 Days, and wow, it is fantastic. You guys have to read it. Like I said, it's a very quick read, 18 plus, very spicy, like extremely, and it has age gap in it, so if you don't like that, you're not gonna enjoy it. But I wasn't too sure about it, like I didn't really like know too much going into it, but I'm obsessed. Just this quick read, it probably took me like an hour to read. I don't even remember. I read it a couple months ago, but it was so freaking good. So definitely read The Renter, the First 3 Days. And then The Townie is actually, I think, like a prequel, or it like explains like a lot of the setup on some of the characters that you meet in The Renter. So that is also on my TBR, and I'm sure there will be more that I end up reading that I don't mention in this video. That's always how it goes. But that's kind of the baseline for what I plan to read this month. And I'm so excited for all of these books. Sorry, I keep like scratching. We handed out candy last night to the trick-or-treaters, and we were sitting outside, and I got a lot of mosquito bites. But anyway, that's gonna be it for today's video. Add me as a friend on Goodreads. Check out my other book videos on YouTube. I have a playlist down below. I will also have all of these books that I talked about linked down below as well, in case you guys are interested in getting them from Kindle Unlimited or purchasing them and reading them with me this month. But that's going to be it. Don't forget to buy Crave and read it. Like, no joke. That's the moral of this video. Moral of the story is buy Crave and read it and you will love it. So anyway, I love you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you in the next one. Bye.